Good morning. Thank you everyone for being here. I was invited to speak to share our journey and put together a deck with the help of some of my other colleagues and my CloudBees reps as well. And I hope what I share today offers you some value, and if nothing else, just to start some conversations with each other. Because a lot about the journey is talking with each other about what works well and what doesn't work well. So let's see here. Okay, wrong direction. There we go. So who is Thomson Reuters? First, I just wanted to introduce our company, our organization. We originally were West Publishing. So for those of you that have lived in the Minneapolis area, St. Paul area for a long while, we were the building that was down off of Wabasha in downtown St. Paul. Then moved to Eagan. That's where our corporate headquarters are. We merged with Thomson, a Canadian-based news organization, maybe 10 years ago. And then we merged with Reuters. Last year, we split the organization. So if you're tracking it all, there was a Blackstone purchase, and our finance and risk division was split off to a new company called Refinitiv. Pardon me, I do have a little bit of a cold today. It's important to note that because that did affect our strategy, and you'll see that in the slide. So part of our journey, and your journey as well, will be about how to be creative when your organization has strategic moves that are interrupting what you originally wanted to do, right? So you try to incorporate your original goals into what the organization is currently tracking to. What we achieved in centralizing our build management service and many of our other DevOps services as well, we reduced the number of snowflakes that were out there. We still do have a lot of snowflakes. And there's more that we can go after to centralize and have that then common developer experience. But meanwhile, since we started this journey 5 years ago, there was already a number of teams on our service at that time, and we've adopted at least 20 new teams. Counting teams is a little bit tricky. Metrics, as you know, can be a little flaky. We have hundreds of development teams around the globe, and to separate them into units and how they adopt your service is a little tricky. But I think just saying 20 teams, knowing that we have probably over 50 to 100 teams on our service right now, gives you a little bit idea of the scope. And each time a team adopts or onboards to our central service, it saves our organization at least $500,000 just in setting up your own Jenkins instance. As an individual development team, you need to account for a lead of some kind, right? An architect, a couple of developers, a couple of engineers. Then you have to think about support. You need a delivery manager. You have to think about all your infrastructure. And that easily adds up to $500,000. Excuse me. So do the math, 20 to 50 teams times $500,000, it's really easy to see the value there. Another key point, exits. So with the company splitting last year, some tools went to the new company, and some of our tools and services stayed with TR. So the company focus this year and next is to get off of the tools that went to the other company. Our solution with CloudBees stayed with TR. So we are supporting the Refinitiv users who have gone, are now a separate company, and they need to get off onto their own solution. But meanwhile, another aspect of that split was our hardware. So some of our on-prem hardware went to the new company and some stayed with TR. For the hardware that went to the new company, we have a huge incentive to get off early. And we were able to devise a plan to get off our slaves on that hardware that went to the new company because of the flexibility and backward compatibility within the CloudBees application. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And I just wanted to share briefly 2 partner success stories. So as a central service, we support, as I said, many different development teams. One team, our enterprise content team, had to get off our private cloud VMs by June of last year. Had we not had our central service available, they never would have made the date. And we were really in a bind because that private cloud VM solution was expiring for many reasons, and they were able to move over hundreds of jobs and stand up very quickly. Also, they reduced their support team because they had their own Snowflake Jenkins out there. And they still do support that. I mean, not their Snowflake Jenkins, but their own master. So when they moved over and we collapsed them into our central service, they were able to eliminate 2 FTEs of their own infrastructure team. That was a significant savings. Another partner, FindLaw, is one of our business units in the legal division. And I have here today Tori Mandel, sitting back there, and Chris Clubb. And I invite you to speak with them after the presentation over the lunch this afternoon. They have a fantastic story, a really fantastic story about how a specific business unit approached getting their capital funding approved, how they convinced their business that they needed to stabilize their releases, and then charge forward. And they're really one of our leading teams within our organization, helping others to see how they can also realize their own DevOps transformation. But these numbers here are a little bit, I think, are pretty staggering. In 1 year, from going to totally coordinated releases into more automated releases, they had a 30% reduction in total major incidences. They also had a 48% reduction in release-related incidences. It's hard to capture these metrics, let alone have them speak so loudly. And the automation can't take credit entirely for those statistics. They had bundled the DevOps transformation with a modernization project. So they were able to, through re-architecting and redesigning their solution, add into it the automation that we wanted. And so those statistics in terms of the reduction in incidences reflect that modernization as well as the automation. But it is believed that the vast majority of that was due to the automation of deploys. So a little bit about my background. I grew up in development. I went to the University of Minnesota. I was a comp sci major in the assembly language class, passed, and said, I need to get the heck out of this because I'm not a bits and bytes girl, right? Literally. And so it was just happen chance that I was walking through Blagan Hall. So for those of you that are familiar with the university campus, I was trying to find a class. And I bumped into this door and it said Management Information Systems. And I thought, oh, well, this isn't the class I need to go to, but I wonder what this is. Opened the door, I went in there, and it was through the Carlson School of Management, a department within there called Management Information Systems. And it was all about the application of technology to solve business problems. And I was born again. I was like, that's me! That's who I am, right? So that's kind of how I started at the U. And then right after I graduated, I was offered a position as a junior developer, that's what we were called in those days, at Lawson Software, which was so lucky because they were so far ahead of the rest of the technology profession in terms of object concepts, reuse. We developed on Unix boxes. At that time, they were really only in the schools and part of Unisys. So we were way ahead of the game on all that, and I learned really good principles in general, just about technology and developing technology. So fast forward, so I spent quite a bit of time in development. I absolutely loved it. I thought I was getting paid to do something that I dreaded in college, right? So it was a ton of fun. And then I spent about 10 years in consulting at Oracle. And that's where I first got exposed to implementing with an agile cadence. And the reason I bring this up is because the agile culture and cadence is really, to support that, you ultimately need to have automation. Because as you move closer and closer to microservices and just having that continuous deploy mindset, and really we live in a continuous world, right? So I feel like we have to be iterating all the time or you'll get left behind. So I had many experiences with Agile. One that I like to bring up is an XP project that was with Donaldson during Desert Storm. And it was a very interesting, very small group, and that was one of my, sort of extreme Agile experiences. And then at TR, we implemented a large-scale Agile using the DevJam. If some of you are familiar with DevJam, right? DevJam was in a couple of times helping us to define our cadence. And that experience really drove home the value of Agile. because we took what should have been a 4 or 5 year project and got it done within 2 years, right? And it was simply because involving the customer early, doing the retros, taking the high risks first, that whole iterative cadence really made a difference. And that's essential as a part of your DevOps transformation and journey, is to consider where you're at with your agile culture and cadence. Currently, from my DevOps experience, I'm the service owner of our central services for build and deploy. That includes artifacts and release management as well. Previously, I also owned code, source code, pre-CI we call it now, so our source code solution, and our Jira, our issue. We have a couple different issue management solutions. But right now, I love where I'm at. It's the perfect fit. I love solving puzzles. It leverages the background that I've had in engineering, the various engineering leadership and consulting positions that I've had, so it's really exciting. Career diversity, I think I already mentioned a few things about where I've been employed before. And when you're in consulting, you get exposure to a lot of different industries. So it was really a privilege to work with so many different types of industries. You see the commonalities, but then you also see the uniqueness. And for you and your organization, there will be things that will be unique about your transformation that are inherent to your industry. If you're in something like wealth management, typically you're more risk averse. You might not be the first one out there doing all the automation because your brokers don't want a new system. They want to make sure they can sell and trade. So it will vary depending on your industry. So keep that in mind. And look at what your peers are doing in your industry. Because at the same time, you can't sit and wait back, and wait. It's moving. And eventually, you won't be able to get your product to market faster than your competitor. So even though there's risk, you do still have to consider moving. So in true agile form, and I love this because I think it works so well in many aspects of our life, is we look at demo, right? So what did we do? And then what did we do well? And what would we want to do different? So 5 years into our journey, we have thousands of users, tens of thousands of repos, and thousands of build jobs across our global community. We started out in 2014 running on private cloud VMs on at the time I think it was called Cloud-based Jenkins platform, CJP. We hung out there for a year or two and we had rapid adoption. It was like wildfire. Teams were wanting to get on this service as quick as they could. We couldn't keep up. And the hardware that we were on became non-strategic hardware. So we couldn't build it out anymore. And we actually lost some teams because we couldn't build fast enough for them. And they did stand up some of their own snowflakes because we couldn't move fast. The idea at that time was to move to our private cloud VM solution, and then that was put on hold. And then it was decided that the strategy changed. And we were not going to become a cloud company, right? That wasn't our secret sauce. We were going to take advantage of the cloud service providers. And we focus on AWS and Azure. There's many others out there, but for whatever reasons, I wasn't part of that, but that's where TR has landed. We focus on Azure and AWS. So once we got that, our first projects going in the cloud, we had to get justification because this is another hurdle you'll run into. People don't understand that a blue chip project that's getting approved for some of these new technologies and to stay ahead of the curve, they need the DevOps underneath it to support that, right? So we were going to the table to our AWS team saying, we're important, we need to be out here, and there's no other solution that will work. And they're like, well, you're not a blue chip project. We're like, yeah, but look if all these blue chip projects, they're dependent on us. So that's one of your ways of, positioning the importance, is that your blue chip projects, your most important products, are going to be the ones that you're modernizing. And those are the ones that need this, right? So it's a way to be creative and leverage that. And then as I mentioned, so we stood up Cloud-based Jenkins Enterprise in AWS. We had a lot of adoption. We moved a lot of people over from our old version, but then the company announced the split. And that kind of put everything on hold for a little while. regrouping, figuring out what was going, what tool was going to land in which company, where would we move to for the tools that didn't stay. So we lost a little bit of focus in terms of our overall adoption to get people onto our central tool. But at the same time, again, being creative, we're looking at the teams that needed to move off of tools that went to the other company and put them on ours. So for example, Jenkins, it's one of our snowflakes. That snowflake went to the other company. We have the teams that stayed TR that are using that snowflake, they moved to TR Jenkins. And so in that way, we're still trying to reach some of our goals across the organization for that consistent developer experience by the teams using the central services. So 2020 and beyond, we have to get off of these tools, or off of the opposite tools by the end of middle of Q4 of next year. So really the focus at the company right now is exiting and then accelerating to the cloud and SaaS. I wanted to just share a picture of what our environment looks like right now, just because pictures tell us 1,000 words. And I find consistently when I'm working with teams that if we don't have a picture to look at when we're talking about things, the conversation takes a lot longer. This picture was actually drawn by our team lead on a call when I said, Alex, I need a picture. I can't track what you're saying. And he starts drawing this up for me, and I said, oh, that's perfect. So right on a phone call, a WebEx that we were having, this was created. So I encourage you all to draw a picture. And I would miss the beginning, so I didn't see how many were technical hands-on versus leadership. How many do hands-on technical engineering? Okay, that's what I thought. We have a pretty good crowd here. So a lot of my presentation focuses on some of the business aspects and the culture. It's important for you to be aware of that as well, because you actually influence that culture and that much more than you realize. But anyways, I really want to encourage you to draw a picture. Plus, you get your name out there, right? So it's good advertising. A couple of more details about our environment. We're running Mesos Marathon. I wish we were not. It's not as stable as I would like. We do have service issues because of it. We'd like to get to Kubernetes. There's still some debate in the company about Kubernetes at our company and where we're going with it. But just know that if you are on Mesos Marathon, you're probably running into some issues like we are, and I would not recommend it. We have extensive network access. As I mentioned, we have hundreds of company or development organizations around the world. Azure, AWS, third-party partners like Capado, who supports our Salesforce automation. We had to integrate with them, so we had to open up, our gates so that we could talk to them, things like that. Production masters, we have 16 right now. One really key thing that I would share about that is your naming convention for your masters. Prior to this CJE 1.x, we didn't have any way to associate the jobs and the views with the businesses that own them, and it was very difficult. If we had changes that we had to make and we had to get out to the community, we had like email distribution lists, but we really didn't know who owned it. And when you're in a very large company like I work at, it's hard to find that sometimes, right? So with the new solution, we decided we were going to be smarter, and we aligned our masters and even our folders within our masters to our asset taxonomy. And what that is the way that the organization is structured, right? The hierarchy of the organization. Now, the tricky thing about that is organizations change all the time, right? But the asset taxonomy is all of our assets in our company are in that system. So if we are tagged to that ID, we've got that association. Even if the name of the organization changes, we still have that, key link back to that asset. So I would encourage you to consider what would be important for your organization to recognize, your master names. We have 6 playground masters right now. We will be consolidating them. They kind of just popped up as we went, but we need to take a step back and consolidate. We have 24 Docker agents. We have a couple of Windows test agents out there. We did defer our Windows plans after the split was announced, so that's why you don't see more Windows test agents out there. A couple Mac OSs that we support. And then our former solution on CJP, we started with, I think, 360 VMs when we did that cleanup to exit that hardware early, and we got it down to just 200 now. So just like any other technology, you're going to have tech debt, and you want to incorporate that tech debt into these projects as you go to keep it down. Because think of that. We literally had 3 FTEs managing those 350 VMs because the load would go up and down, right? So I was so happy when we cleaned them up and when we got to CJE and AWS, because then you got the instance management from AWS. We didn't have to do that anymore. Declarative pipelines, we have over 10,000. That includes our test ones. I just sort of added everything up that was on the CJOC menu. The number doesn't surprise me. That does sound about right, especially if I look at our freestyle jobs, which are still out there from our old solution back on CJP. And we're still supporting them. Many of those partners have migrated over already to the declarative pipelines, but some just, they're legacy products, and there just is no value in modernizing those jobs into pipelines, so they just hang out there. And to go back one point here, one of the beauties of CloudBees is that they were able to support those freestyle jobs. Let's see if I can get this thing to work. Right, so these VMs here were moved over from this hardware that went to the other company. These VMs stayed because that's the company that split. But this shutdown here, all of the jobs we moved to these 3 new masters. So see, I didn't show you all of the masters we had. But I wanted to highlight that CloudBees, CJE, right, was able to support freestyle jobs that had been created back on the old version. And when we found that out, that was just like mid-December, I was so excited. Because I'd been trying to get rid of that CJP and shut that down for so long, and I couldn't get any traction to really get the money to get rid of that tech debt. And here it was. I was like, finally, we can get rid of that old version. So just know that there is a lot of flexibility, and wait for those moments to come when you can incorporate your goals into something else. Integrations. These integrations are key. Right? Being a large company, we have multiple source code systems. Our largest is a Git-based solution, also TFS. We're very, very big TFS. We're moving to GitHub. We're also moving to VSTS. In fact, I think we've done some of that already. And looking at ADO, Azure DevOps, right? And all of that, though, says if you have your source code centralized, that is another step towards consistency across your development teams, and it makes building your jobs and your templates easier because you don't have as many systems to have to reach out to. The rest of this is, JFrog, AWS cross account. That was very interesting, figuring out the technology to be able to talk across AWS accounts. But these others are kind of your familiar solutions in the market. Just to highlight again a little bit more about FindLaw being one of our partners on the central service. Again, they achieved that higher stability in just a year, right? So those statistics are pretty powerful. The other thing about FindLaw is they really focused on what was the benefit to the ops team and what was the benefit to the development teams. And you'll see there that for the ops teams, obviously it's easier to support if you have a consistent experience and if some of that's offloaded to a central team. They had reduced their tech debt. They were much more empowered. And then for their development teams, it was, again, flexibility for new technologies, faster deployments, and the big one was less manual validation. Right? Nobody likes doing manual work and manual validation. So if you look at these numbers, you see 80% is still on coordinated releases. Eventually, that's going to flip, right? But it's still noteworthy that 13% are already automated, 6% are gated and scheduled, and then 1% of their products within the FindLaw business unit is doing continuous deployment. So that 20% that's not on the coordinated releases, those are the products that went through a modernization because they have been successful with their CTO knowing the value of this and their CTO being able to explain the value to the business unit that any modernization project they have, they incorporate the DevOps automation as well. The other thing I thought that was really interesting and said a lot about the FindLaw individuals, the colleagues of mine, is they got together and defined what DevOps meant for them. Because if you could just go Google DevOps, right, you're going to get a million different definitions. And you need to all get on the same page. What does it mean for you? And it is a huge change in culture and mindset. It is about working as a single team and not working so much in silos. Org charts don't matter. We're all wearing the same T-shirt, right? which is deploy faster, get to the market faster. Overall, their theme was DevOps enables agile and microservices development. A couple other things about the FindLaw experience and why they were able to, charge ahead so quickly. Leaders like Tori and Chris, I mean, it was key that first Tori joined their organization. She had come from Target, and she was able to really start to bring forward the ideas and go for the big ask, to get the capital funding. And then when Chris moved over from another organization, he brought that lead, technical lead, vision and strategy. And I think it's really important to have that one person that people look up to as in DevOps. It isn't going to be one person that makes it happen, but we're human beings, and we tend to like to look towards, something that is driving us to the next step, and also have the opportunity to influence that. And I think when Chris joined the organization, we saw a lot happen. So that's important. Think about that when you're, looking at your own career growth and what you want to do, or if you're managing teams, or if you're trying to get started, you need to have that thought leader in the trenches. And now this was really cool. So they started this book club. I can't take any credit for this, and I wanted to get Tori to present it, but that didn't work out. So anyways, what she did is she took the book, Leading the Transformation, and she had their engineering teams, and ops team read it chapter by chapter. So like a week or two, they would read a chapter, and then they'd implement that chapter. I thought that was so brilliant. What a way to sort of educate, empower, get things moving forward just by working collaboratively and learning collaboratively. So I would encourage you to think about, if that might click for your teams. And then just in general, networking, right? So they reached out to a lot of colleagues, they did a lot of meetups in the Twin Cities, went to conferences, DevOps at TR, we had our own DevOps conference in 2016, and then DevOps Days in Minneapolis. And Target Dojo. So they took their teams to, tour Target Dojo, and if you're not familiar with that, just Google it. Target has a website, tons of really great information, really, really good information, and it's free. You can schedule your team to have a visit there, it's free. And I think they do them like as either half day or like 2-day things. It's sort of like a couple different offerings, but I can't say enough about that. I mean, that is one way to really, really, experience it and get a feel for what it would be like. Okay, so what are we doing well at Thomson Reuters with regard to build management and accelerating our CI/CD transformation? The first thing that I think our leadership has done just a fantastic job at is changing our culture. So being that we were born out of a legal company, we have a lot of attorneys in the building. I love my attorneys. Attorneys don't like change a lot of times, and they're more risk averse, right? And they operate a little differently. So that was kind of the culture of the company. Even though we had acquired Thomson and then we had acquired Reuters being really a completely different culture, but we still were really entrenched in sort of an old school way of operating. So what our company did is we, as I mentioned earlier, we worked with DevJam to start to introduce Agile. And there was various pockets of that. Everybody didn't wait for another team to do it. We just found out about it, and we'd go off on our own and set up another DevJam workshop and get going. But I think the bottom point here about the corporate culture, it was what really made the difference. So we rolled out the Sen Delaney culture mindset program. That's another one. Just Google it. And we took the entire organization over 18 months in groups of 20 to 30, and we went through these Sen Delaney workshops. And it was so transformative, even for myself personally. I mean, it impacted you beyond your role at your company. And that had just made such a huge difference. The picture I have there is of the mood elevator. So if any of you have been through the Sen Delaney program, one of the artifacts that comes out of that is this mood elevator. So they literally put it up in our elevator, And it's a good reminder. You can't see it, but basically in the middle there, there's like the low moods, and then above is your higher moods. And it's good to know when you're showing up each day, what mood am I in? Or what mood is the people that I'm working with on this phone call if I'm on a WebEx or sitting next to me? It's important to know, because if you're in the lower area, and again, I encourage you to look this up. This is all on their website. If you're down here, you're self-righteous, you're judgmental, that's not a good time to start to introduce innovation or to talk to somebody about something creative, right? Because they're not there. So you have to recognize that and wait. And then you also want to try to make sure you stay above, the middle line there as much as you can. Because that's where you can be creative and innovative. And that's where work gets really fun. Another thing our company did this last year is they rolled out Radical Candor. And this is a book, it's a must-have. You have to read this, whether you're hands-on technical or a leader. It's such a great book. Her theme, Kim Scott, her theme is about caring personally and then challenging directly. Being from the Midwest and being Minnesota nice, we don't do that very well. However, I grew up on the east side of St. Paul. We're a lot more like New Jersey people. So I'm more like in your face, and I'm just going to tell you what's going on and figure that's the best way to kind of get things done. Because I like to GSD, get shit done. I just like to get stuff done. So I love this book, and I can't encourage you enough to read it. Even if your organization isn't rolling it out, you can personally benefit from it, and you can personally start to influence the others in your organization to have that broader mindset. Okay, so what are we doing well specifically for build management service? We have implemented guardrails for a consistent developer experience. Those guardrails are things like the pipeline templates that we've created, the masters that we've created by asset. So we don't allow business units to manage their own master. There are a couple exceptions. The reason we do that is we're able to control some of we have more consistency. So for example, if we gave too many admin rights to the business units to manage their own master, we'd have different plugins out there. We wouldn't be able to do upgrades. We'd have a lot of complexity that we'd have to deal with. It was a pretty easy decision there, the benefit to retain some of that control in this case versus empowering the business units. So just think about that when you're setting up your masters. I think we've done it well. We're deploying a lot faster. Another thing about deploying, we have a lot of dependencies in our organization. So there's platform services teams, the layers underneath that support multiple business units. Those platform teams, if we're dependent on their binaries and they're doing manual deploy still, we can be waiting, right? We don't have what we need when we need it. And that's why it's so important for across your organization to have that automation, because there's more and more dependencies. And you can only go as fast as your slowest horse, right? And we can't go that fast. Another thing we implement, collaboration with CloudBees. I can't say this enough. We have our customer success manager, Matt Carrico, going to give him a little bit of advertising here. Our technical success manager, Matt Hicks. Matt, thing one and thing two. Sam, you had the I am Sam. We call them thing one and thing two. Yeah, that was really cute. They are phenomenal. I cannot tell you how many times they have pulled us out of a bad spot. And then also just proactively. Matt Hicks will remind me when I get into my tactical mode, like trying to take care of something and just wanting to get it done, right? And he'll remind me of, that might not be the most strategic thinking, because I've got the pressure of my, development group, several of them behind me, wanting something done and just want to get it out there. And so they're constant reminders for us too, in terms of making sure we're keeping an eye on where we want to go strategically. Support, sales, our professional services. We have not engaged in CloudBees professional services in terms of a contract, but we have called them in a couple times when we were really in the ditch and I didn't think we were going to be able to pull it off. And we didn't end up having a contract with professional services, but just the conversation we had with them and the framework that they set up in terms of putting together what services they would have provided, it really helped us out. And then the only reason we didn't actually end up going with them is we had some other internal resource changes going on, and so we got some additional help to get us out of the ditch. But really, it was just so valuable just even talking with them, because they have all that experience, that we have it within our own organization, but we don't have it working with multiple organizations. Mandatory web access for critical changes. Since we are a central service and we have, tens and 20s of development teams out there, if there's a critical change that has to happen, we put a banner on the Jenkins page, right? Because that's where you are all hanging out, right? Is in the software. We have a hub page. I'll show that later. It's really important to have all of your best practices and learning videos and those kinds of things available through some kind of internal communication. But beyond that, it still boils down to talking to people. You need to talk to them. And then when you talk with them, then it really hits home what it is that they have to do and why. And hopefully it makes it easier for them, and then they can go back to their leadership to get the support they need to make sure that their critical changes will happen in time. One that came up last November, we had our artifact management solution going off of an on-prem over to Refinitiv AWS. So it was outside our firewall then, right, because we were TR. So we had to do some real interesting tricks, to make that happen. And that was one project that I wasn't sure I was going to be having Thanksgiving because we had so much work to do. And the only way we really got the teams moving on it was, I really think, through those web access. So just keep in mind that talking face-to-face makes a huge difference. If you're a small company, you can just do that, when you're getting your cup of coffee in the morning. But when you're a larger company, it has to be a little bit more organized. Okay, and then here's our community of practice page. I just wanted to show it because there's a lot of work that goes into this. We were fortunate enough to have a technical writer help us with it. I had worked with her previously at the company, and I knew how she could come in and learn a tool, pull that information out of the engineers, translate it into something that is succinct and easy for people to understand. And so we use this hub page, again, like I mentioned, to put announcements on it. And then if it's a new company or new team, they can go over here and do our learnings, right? So we have a couple videos that we made. Most of you don't like to watch these videos, but we can tell you that we have it, right? And then we have getting started, our feature list, and it's a great place to send people when they're first interested. So when a development team that isn't currently on our service, right? We can route them here, they can get some general information. Then we set up and sort of have a chat with them and say, well, tell us about what's going on. What do you have, where are you at right now? Because all of our development teams are at different places in their journey. And then we can help dovetail that into how they can go faster by using our central service. We also have an Ask TR Jenkins here. If you look carefully, some of the questions that haven't been answered, or they're answered, but they're not marked as answered. So it's hard keeping up with all the different ways you can communicate with your teams. But you can't over-communicate, in my opinion. I guess, if you're saying the same thing repeatedly and people aren't getting it, it's probably because you need to get at them in a different way. What would we do different? Better visibility to our dependent services when they have outages. So if you guys all work in a CI/CD space and the build fails, the first thing is the finger gets pointed at, guess what? The build team. But it's oftentimes not us, right? So we implemented a dependent services tab on our CJOC page where we just do a simple ping to see if they're alive or not, and we just have a green or red, either they're alive or not. So if one of our partners is running into trouble, and they have the knowledge to go look at our CJOC page, they could see which service was down. And then they could register a complaint directly with that team. Otherwise, our team does get notified when our dependent services go out, but sometimes that doesn't always happen. So I just think the dependent services and outages associated with them is something that we're trying to improve. Because as you know, if builds aren't running, nothing's moving, right? You can't move stuff, development's stuck. Stay current on cloud these releases. This is like anything else. Our goal is to release every month or two. And invariably, something comes up and it's 4 or 5 months before we keep up. Right now, we're at 1.11.12, I think, and I think 1.11.18 is out. There were some pretty big security patches that came out with that. I'm not sure that they all apply to us, but nonetheless, something else came up just this week where a partner was looking for a newer version of an agent, and we can't install it for them until we get to 1.11.17. So now instead of us just being able to, and this partner is on a really critical path. They're redeveloping a product that went to the other company because some of these products were shared. They are on a massive critical path. And we have to say, it's going to take us like a while, 4 to 6 weeks, because we got to do an upgrade, instead of just quickly putting it in. So that's how you get caught off guard if you don't stay current. More partner involvement, and even just cross-community sharing. It's so important. Our partners are why we exist as a central service, right? And we need to be listening to them. We need to be efficient when we're asking them to listen to us, because they're busy, right? We want them developing. We don't want them worrying about how they're going to push their builds and deploys to the various environments. That's a tricky one. I already mentioned some of the things that we do. And another idea that I have introduced is sort of internal meetups, right? Do some more virtual meetups within our organization, especially for exit-related projects, and trying to dovetail how teams can leverage getting their transformation done concurrent with the pressures of these exit projects. And then, yeah, just increasing awareness and education in general. The book club conference, I think, or concept is just so fun. It might be hard for people to start reading a book, because sometimes we don't like that, but if you just make it a little bit fun associated with it, or maybe get a prize every time you read a chapter, I think that's just a great way to get people moving. So why do you need to move now? I'm going to, let's see here, remember how to do this. I'm going to share, where did I go? Oh, I was just going to click, sorry. You might have to help me out here, let's see. Well, while he's getting that ready, just let me say, I chose this YouTube because I knew it would be about 11:45 right now, and you've been listening to a couple hours of people speaking, and lunch is coming.
But Holland comes in for a pit stop. Time to refuel and change tires. Lou Moore himself changes the tires. Only 4 crew members, including the driver, are allowed to work on the car. It's a tense time. Holland stays in his seat, anxious to get away. Let's watch.
So if you didn't catch it at the beginning, this is a 1950s race car, right? And they're changing the tires. And this is how long it takes. A long time. Yes. I mean, just think of your product and your competitors' products are the cars on the raceway. And if you're still back doing manual deploys, meanwhile, your competitor is how many times around the racetrack, right? Still taking a really long time.
The tires are changed at last. A crewman polishes the windshield.
I love the guy
Holland moves
wiping the
away
windshield.
just 67 seconds after he stopped.
67 seconds. Felt like forever, right? Okay, here we go. 2013. This is just incredible. Right? Okay, I'm going to let him do the mechanics here. So think about your manual deploys, right? They're back in the 1950s. It was acceptable then to take 67 seconds to change your tires and scrub your windshields, right? But look at, we went from 67 seconds to like a blink. And this made me think of DevOps automation, because even 10, 20 years ago, right, this was still a concept. I mean, nobody was doing this. And now in the last 5 years, it's really starting to gain traction. And if you don't take action, you're going to be not able to, get your product out to market and back on the racetrack as fast as your competitors. So you have to start, and you have to start somewhere, even if you're the most risk-averse organization. Got it? Thank you. Okay, so that was my call to action for you all. So how do you get started? Again, the culture is so important. And if your leaders are not bringing this culture to your organization for you, don't wait. Just go out and start to read about it, think about it, to incorporate it in your own life, and start to bring it to your role at your job. You need to identify your key influencers and decision makers. And this is more this is actually both, for the hands-on technical and the leaders. Because change happens by individuals introducing ideas and sticking with it. So you might have a chat with your architect, or your architect might have a chat with you about some of their plans. And it's important to participate in that because it's an opportunity to influence yourself, how your organization moves forward. If you're in a role like mine, or another managerial type position, we have to always be thinking about how are we going to get the money, right? Because getting it funded, this is another shiny new object. From a business perspective, oh, there's IT again. Another new shiny object. Why do I have to pay a couple $1 million for that? Well, show them that video and say, do you want your car to be the one, or which car do you want to be driving, right? So both bottoms up and top down, they're both key. Reading, conferences, networking. We have a TR dojo now. Actually, we're so big we have our own dojo. I didn't even know that when I was reviewing this presentation. Tori mentioned it to me, and I said, we do? So pretty cool, right? But we're a really big company. So if you're not a big company, take advantage of like Target Dojo. Our architects set the standard at our company. We've even taken it a step farther to make available to our partners a technology radar. And that is to help avoid duplicative tools, also duplicative research on tools. So we don't need, 50 development groups looking at all the different options for any particular tool, right? We want to narrow that down a little bit without interfering with innovation, because the idea isn't to have people be creative and think about different ways that they want to do things, but it is to at least be aware if research has already been done, what have they done, and pick it up from there. It's not a stopgate. It's more just, hey, we've already looked at this. Take a look at what we did over here, right? So it's a sharing. And again, don't wait for permission. A lot of it starts by just one or two people trying things out, starting to show the value, and then it gains traction from there. The funding I put as a separate slide because it is so important. We've already talked about how we position this with modernization projects. That's a pretty easy sell. If you use language to your business partner like reducing release or increasing release stability, that's something they're going to connect with, because they don't want releases going out to your customer that are not stable, right? So they're going to understand that kind of language. So try to put it into language that they understand. Add it as a rider to another CapEx project. I gave that example earlier where we had an exit project. We had to get off that hardware. Well, we could, if we got off the hardware that went to Refinitiv early, there was significant monthly cost savings for the, till September of next year. Significant. And we moved all that stuff over, and then I seized the moment to say we can also shut down CJP. And we did. So it's very exciting. It makes our license renewal easier as well, if you don't have multiple versions running. Not to mention it wasn't supported anymore, although CloudBees, I do have to note that even though that version was not supported for the last couple of years, if we had an issue, they were there to help us figure it out. Not very many issues happened because we weren't doing a lot of new development or growing that out, but nonetheless, I knew that if we really got into trouble, they would be there. And again, look for other strategic moves that dovetail the argument for tactical updates, because little things along the way help reduce your tech debt, and that's another way you'll start to realize the benefit, little by little. And then eventually, it will just become a line item in your budget cycle, and that's where we're at now. It's a line item in our budget cycle for our central teams, not for all of our individual development teams yet. I just wanted to offer some thoughts about, getting started, because, a transformation, this is iterative. This is multi-year. We've been at it for 5 years, right? And we have a ways to go. So where did we start? We got our agile cadence in place, right? So we got the culture and the cadence going with many of our development teams using agile. And I think that was really one of the ways that it was the seeds for starting to look at automation. We centralized our source code, test automation. If you're going to start deploying all the time, you got to have test automation in place. You also got to get good at rollback, because that was one of the concerns that our partners, our business partners had. If you're going to be deploying all those times, we always have lots of problems. Are you going to be having like continuous problems that you're putting into production? Well, the way we mitigate that is test automation, right? So we try to give them assurance of where we've incorporated additional new testing and the smoke tests that we do automatically when we deploy to prod as well. Today, we've been talking about automating builds, right? And I think that's a great place to start, because you can also automate your deploys. They can be completely separate, right? They don't have to be together. But the builds are the heartbeat of that's where you get the most value, and it's the heartbeat of your whole process to deploy and get your binaries out there for consumption. So to me, that seems like a logical place to start. But even to have those automated builds in place, you've got to have test automation, in my opinion. It's a must. And that you can do totally separately. It's even, that's part of the Agile concept, so it just dovetails off that as well. And then you can get fancier with your integrations. That slide I showed of our key integrations, we didn't have all those in place day one. We launched without all those in place. We made sure we had artifacts, right? We had to get a binary out there. But, integrating to SonarQube, yeah, we wanted it, but we didn't have to have that day one. So it's iterative. And then I think the last thing is, automating your deploys. In my opinion, that's where you go next. So just some ideas on, it's a puzzle. There's pieces that you can start to put together slowly and then work your way towards where you want to be. So are you ready? Are you ready to get started? I thought this was kind of fun because many of us are in the covered wagon still, right? We've got legacy products out there, and they may never go to automation because there just isn't value in them. They're going to die on the vine over the next 3 to 5 years, right? There's no reason why you would do that. But if that's one of your strategic products, and you're still, at the covered wagon, then you're in trouble probably, I suppose. This was a race car from the 1950s, so I wanted to take you back to the YouTube. This was more recent race car. And then here we have the driverless car, which I'm really loving that idea. Because think about it. I think about this when I'm on the road too, being a DevOps girl. There should be a ton of accidents every day. Think about all the cars on the freeway and all these humans behind it and how many mistakes we could make. But there's not very many accidents when you think about how many people are out there. And automation, DevOps automation, is kind of the similar concept, right? If you do things slowly and manually, there's a lot of human intervention. And if you get it automated, then it's repeated and it's consistent, and it's only your infrastructure variables that might influence it. And then finally, I hope to live to see the Jetsons mode of transportation and speed that they can operate at. I offered a few readings here. These are just books that I've picked up over the years. Many of them are going to be familiar to you. I wanted to call out The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge. It's an old book from the 80s, but the concepts, if you want to go back to technology and where some of these concepts originated from, read his book. Because it's all about decision-making being at the customer, as close to the customer and the person that can implement it as possible. If that isn't Agile, I don't know what is, right? So it's an interesting read if you like that kind of reading. But otherwise, these are just really good DevOps books that are out there that many of us have already read. I already talked about Radical Candor, and then the Sun Delaney program.